we've got our current president of Longleaf Pine Realtors on with us, David Saddlemeyer. I see you there in the chat. Hi, everybody else. And Jimmy, I miss the days when you and I and Kathy would run into each other at the parking lot at WFNC at about 8:58 to 9:02, and I'd get like these couple of seconds of personal time.
Yeah, we all miss that too. We've all had to adjust quite a bit with the pandemic and things that have happened, and we can't gather together like we used to at the radio station.
Yeah, and which was really hanging out in the parking lot. Who would have thought that it wouldn't be safe or appropriate, or you could get caught on video hanging out in a parking lot? And, well, yeah, I guess you could always get in trouble for hanging out in a parking lot. Sorry. As that came out of my mouth, I realized that was probably going down a road. But we were hanging out during daylight hours in the morning. It was perfectly fine. Nothing bad was happening when the three of us were hanging out in the parking lot together. Starting rumors already.
Solving world and community problems.
That's exactly what we were doing. We had all the answers for that 4 minutes every other week. Well, so hopefully Kathy will be on the phone with us soon, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on. We won't talk about Kathy because that would be unfair until she's in the room. We don't want to be labeled as unfair people.
No.
Which one of you's older though?
Oh, I wish you would have been in the room when you asked that question.
Okay, well, hold on. We'll come back to that one. Okay, let's talk a little bit over on the county side of things while we've got you on here. So just in case, everyone's not aware, we do have a brother-sister duo here. And as people who know my background know, I love nepotism. I think it's fantastic. For years, people thought I was married to my father and not his daughter. Jimmy, you and Kathy were much smarter because you got different last names.
Well, we still have the same work ethic, which can be problematic at sometimes.
Yeah, I bet.
Because we work together also.
I bet it can be interesting sometimes. But let's talk a little bit about what's happening over on the county side with things. We are dealing with, from a real estate perspective, things such as an absolute crisis when it comes to couple of things, and this isn't sky is falling, but anyone in this business knows that, oh my God, I can't believe I'm the person who just did that. Would everyone turn off their phones if you're on a call with us right now? That's just COVID technology. And of course, if I pick up the phone, they'll hear the whole conversation. Hang on 1 second, we'll be gone. There we go. Okay, problem solved. We've got an absolute crisis when it comes to housing, actually having housing on the market. We just took on 12 competing offers on a house that was priced at about 170, I guess. We've got, and I'm not the only realtor on the phone that's dealing with that. In fact, some of them probably wrote offers on this house and are very mad at me right now. It's like fishing with 2 poles. You also can't sell one house to 7 people. Why not? Why haven't we figured that out? Then we also, of course, nationwide are dealing with a housing affordability issue. And we just had an interesting thing happen in the county with a particular zoning thing. And these will keep happening, where you've got people that don't want 0 lot line developments, and you've got people who might not want it but understand it, and then you've got people who are enthusiastic about it, and that falls under zoning from a county perspective. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective on what we can do with sort of land use and regulations and how it feeds into our housing crisis.
Sure, I'd be glad to, Wendy. And before I get there, I want to talk a little bit about some of the things you brought up. One of the reasons I was pretty excited to be here, and I was pretty involved in that last zoning case, if we're talking about the same one, that happened in a rural part of the county. I was pretty active in that one, but we are at an interesting place now. There is a certain sweet spot of houses in our community that really probably don't even make it on the MLS very long, if at all. And I can remember you and I having many conversations about, wow, we've got a year's worth of inventory in some price points, And there's always been that difficulty. But I like to think of myself as a pretty pragmatic person, that cause and effect happens. And affordable housing is a little bit of a it's a misnomer in some ways, but in other ways people have different ideas of what affordable housing means.
Sure.
There's affordable housing, and then there's Section 8 housing, and then there's all kinds of other housing. You and I have had discussions about this at length. And as I am a pragmatic person, I am also a cause and effect person, which means that many times our actions that we do at one time cause the effect of what happens, and sometimes it's not a good effect. And I'm not ashamed to say that I think clusters of affordable housing are probably not the best long-term solution for people getting out of affordable housing. I've always been of the mindset of a number of government programs that the goal should be that it not be a long-term fix. And when I say long-term, I even mean generational fix, but it should be, the purpose of it is to get them out of the situation that they are in, whether it be homelessness or affordable housing. I looked at affordable housing, the numbers from last year, and when I finally got the answer I wanted, I was a little surprised, but what they told me was only 5 people had gone off of affordable housing last year, and they weren't even sure why.
So let me ask you, in that regard, you are speaking of subsidized housing, right?
Well, I am speaking of what goes through our community development at a number of different levels. Mm-hmm. So, and again, sometimes you just throw out the term affordable housing and it can mean different things to different people. But I was a little surprised at only 4. So, and there are stopgaps in place where people could not be qualified for affordable housing at some time in the future, but I don't hear many of those stories. That it seems like once they get in, there's a comfort level. Comfort level is not the right word, but the affordable housing that we have now is really, really nice. But where I have my difficulty with affordable housing is traditionally in those clusters of areas, and you and I had the discussions about redlining and things that have happened in the past, that there's a couple things that typically happen in those areas that are probably not in the best interest of the tenants that live there. And that is, there's very little economic growth in those areas. Traditionally, there's been a higher level of crime. There's been the schools are really not the best performing schools in the area. Joblessness happens in those areas. And it's sort of, you're manifesting yourself into a situation where once you get into affordable housing, it's difficult to break out of that and experience things in the other parts of the community. So that was probably the first part of your question. Tell me again about, we were talking about the zoning and.
No, yeah, that's great. And I think also, just in case we've got listeners that are with us today, let's just, I like to break things down a little bit because there's things I discovered getting to know you and getting to know Kathy over the years that I didn't always necessarily understand. And your knowledge base when it comes to affordable housing and you applying that terminology to different types of government programs, whether it's Section 8 or it's subsidized or it's whatever, really comes from where you live and work as an elected official, because you're on the county commission and the county is actually tasked with those programs, not the city specifically, even though we all have overlays and we're all there together, right? That falls under your purview, is those different types of housing programs that fall under that category of affordable. Because when realtors, and a lot of these people listening today are going to be on the realtor side of it, when we talk affordable housing, most of us approach it from affordability, not from anyone, exactly. Not from assistance based. So the second side of that problem was, how does land use and land use options impact the affordability, not the subsidized or the rental aspect but that ability to build affordably in town, sort of taking you back to that zoning case you were talking about.
Well, that
Possibly,
is
if we were talking about the same one.
First of all, one of the reasons I'm here today is to hear from you and to hear from, maybe a perspective that I hadn't had in the past. But even at the beginning of our session today, you had talked about how you had so many offers on houses, and simple economics that all of us learned in high school will tell you the supply and demand ratio. So if the supply is low and the demand is high, the price goes up. So then if you talk about in the generic term of affordable housing, housing becomes less affordable as the price goes up. Again, cause and effect. It's just out there. So, and typically we've all seen these swings, throughout our time, and we've had areas that did not accumulate in value, and other areas that just blew up in value, and we can go. So when you talk about the land use plans, there's always a little bit of there's a balancing act between a developer wanting to come into an area and develop a neighborhood, a housing development or something. And developers only go there for two reasons. One is that they believe there's a need out there, or they have heard that there's a need. And the other is somebody out there is willing to sell their land. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And ironically, we talked about the one piece that happened recently. I have seen time and time again, in 16 years of being on the county commissioners, there's very few new things. We're just repeating a lot of the old things and trying to make them better. But sometimes the people that were the biggest, that they were against the development at one time, and spoke very, very passionately about there's no need for it. At some time in the future, they had a reasonable price for their land. And of course, they thought that they should be able to get the highest and best use of their land at that time. So, everything that happens in politics is personal. A very smart man told me one time that for every ordinance, I could probably drill it down to one or two people that started the program or started the process of trying to get that ordinance done. I believe that I'm pretty proud of what we did on that last zoning case. And for those of you who don't know, there was a case out in Bethany. And it is typically rural in nature. And the developer came in and went by the rules that we have set. He had to request 0 lot line because that was the type of development, but he had no intention of building a development that had 0 lot lines. And when you go into some of these rural communities, sometimes anything that has an R for residential in front of it meets resistance. And, that's just it. So when we talk about these, I think a lot of people had more of a fear than the reality of what this development would look like. One of the things I didn't bring up was many of our rural areas are serviced by volunteer fire departments, and volunteer fire departments they get their ability to do their job by the property tax rate. It's called the fire tax rate. It's 10 cents per 100. If you don't have good density out there, there are many of those volunteer fire departments that have to be subsidized by the county, which means other people, other taxpayers, so that they can meet the standards and credentials that they have to do. So when you build this project, you are actually helping out to the health and welfare of the community, because the fire department, which are now the first responders in many places, are able to be financed in a way that they can provide a better service.
Yeah, good background as well there, and thank you for that, because another thing I don't think we quite understand is the difference between city and county when it comes to our first responders as well. So kind of breaking down the difference in a volunteer fire department versus a Fayetteville Fire Department and where that funding comes from is one of those little aha moments.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's take a little bit of a different turn. And although this is more seems to be a city agenda item, it's actually a county thing as well. So I'm gonna, I don't want anyone to think you're gonna speak from a city perspective on this, but I think you're gonna bring an interesting perspective to it. We are gonna go down a road of stormwater and infrastructure and those types of things. Talk to us a little bit what's happening on the county side with infrastructure, and if you can speak specifically to stormwater, great. That's only interesting to me at the moment, only because we're kind of dealing with retention ponds and stormwater issues on the city side. But the reality is on the county side, you've got your own big ducks when it comes to infrastructure and what you're dealing with, right, Jimmy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, anytime that you're developing property, that you have the risk of stormwater, you're building impervious things on land that absorbs water. So I think stormwater traditionally is more of an urbanized thing that happens in the city, but we can't discount the fact that anytime you're building impervious roads, sidewalks, rooftops, that it does, the water's got to go somewhere when it's not going into the ground. So there are different parameters that they have to look at. Even in developments like this, retention ponds are important. In many cases, and I think we probably ought to do a better job at this, and many times a retention pond in a certain development can not only take care of the water in that area, stormwater in that area, you know, if we could work it out to where it could also help other areas, because flooding is everywhere. And some places are much more prone to flooding than others. But in a development where everybody's afraid that, oh, you put all this impervious spaces, it's going to flood out my land. Well, that's the purpose of the retention pond, and that's the purpose of engineers to come in to verify that those things happen. So by and large, the restrictions in the county are much less than the restrictions in the city. But if I can go back to pushback and developers and the pushback they get from the community. So many times it's not the project, it's the fear of the project. It's not the project itself. It is this a slippery slope of this development taking away the lifestyle that I grew up in and that my family has had 4 generations here. So there is that. And you know, one of the things I would encourage that if we could do, if there was, you know, developers could actually go out to some of these communities and talk about their project and talk about the benefits of their project and what it is, because so many times there is so many there's misinformation that goes out, and once it gets to social media, it's like ringing a bell. You can't pull it back in, and everybody knows, you know, Abraham Lincoln said, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet." So there's, come on, Wendy, that was a joke. Okay, all right. But it's just once it gets to social media, you know, people tend to believe what they want to believe. And it makes it very difficult to find some common ground. Even the vote the other night was a 4-3 vote. So there wasn't common ground with the elected officials either.
Yeah. You know, and that's an interesting thing, bringing up voting, because a lot of people, especially when you look at that social media, right, the whole believing the thing on social media or whatever, people be like, so and so voted for, so and so voted against. And after getting to know some elected officials personally and not wanting to believe the hype, that's the nice thing about getting to know you, Jimmy, is that, wow, you're not just an elected official, you're actually a person. You know, it's like and so once you meet someone and you know them as a person and then you hear hype, it's like you want to dig more into it. You want to see, was it just hype or was there something there? And one of the little experiments I did in the past was I dug into some of these yes no votes and why people voted one way or the other. And so often people get hung up on the why, that, you know, people voting yay or nay on an issue, but not understanding the reason for the yay or nay vote behind it.
Absolutely.
And they get so upset without knowing the why.
Okay, Wendy, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. We're not that smart. Okay, elected officials are really not that smart. We're only as good as the information that we receive. We're almost like a judge sometimes, where one side is trying to convince us one way and another side is trying to convince us the other way. And we have to take that information and make the best decision we can with the information we have.
So Jimmy, I see Kathy's got her hand up. If we can bring her in from the waiting room, I think she wanted to say that, yes, she is that smart, but Jimmy, her brother, may not be. So I saw Kathy raise her hand. So I'm sure she's got something to say if we can.
I've heard that before.
So we'll see if we can get Kathy into the room with us so everyone can see her. But yeah, exactly. You know, and what you just said, I've heard time and time again, which is, you know, if you've got information, not just an opinion, opinions are important, but opinions are a dime a dozen. Everybody's got an opinion. If you've got information on an issue, you and I have had some great talks about information. You mentioned that one redlining talk we had, and that was such a good one. We actually came back for a second round of that conversation. And you know, that was the kind of thing where you were able to teach me some things and I was able to teach you some things. And one person can't know it all. You possibly cannot know even after however many terms, 16 years, you said? 16 years?
Yeah, and 4 years on the city council.
Wow, 16 years. You know, you still can't know everything about everything, right? And I love that, because just a couple of years ago, we had the whole redlining conversation and you were great because you're like, wait a minute, what? Really? It was just fantastic. And then the conversations we've had where I've just listened to you and I'm like, oh, okay. So Kathy, can you hear us? Because we can't hear you. It looks like you're still muted. Okay, now we can hear you.
I can hear you, but I cannot do my video for some reason.
Okay, we're working on that.
Okay.
So we had the same issue with Jimmy, so we'll keep working on it, but we've got a really pretty headshot of you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it actually stands up to realtor standards.
Awesome.
That good. Yeah.
City of Fayetteville.
Awesome.
So first, I'd like to apologize. We are in a city council meeting and that we are here with the legislature. So kind of talking to them of our ask, and I had to step in. So I apologize for being late, but I hope that you can invite me back. And my brother took one for the team like he always does, having my back, and I appreciate that.
Well, he kind of had your back, and then I asked which one of you was the elder, and he said, no, wait till Kathy gets in the room.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah,
that's not good.
So I know, implied or true or not, he implied that you were the elder there. So I just want to say.
Well, don't do that.
I'm getting him in trouble. Don't worry. I'm just wanting to get him in trouble.
So he might be the older, but I've always told him what to do, even at the age of 2. So it's okay.
Nice. Well, and I think, as you know, as Mayor Pro Tem, and congratulations on that as well, I'd like to say there might be a chance that you kind of outrank him because you've got that nice little comma, just little 3 words after your name there. So congratulations on that.
Well, thank you, but we're a good team. You're a good team.
You're a good team. All right. So I'm going to throw something straight at both of you right here. Let's give a little bit of background, talk about the interesting sales tax agreement, specifically food and beverage, that Cumberland County and the Fayetteville City have that no one else has in the state of North Carolina, because you guys are going up and making your ask you just mentioned, right, Kathy?
Yes. And I'm gonna let Jimmy discuss that more.
Kathy's walking somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going in and out of this other meeting. So
yes. We're just glad to have you. Jimmy, give us a little bit of background first on what this deal is and why it's important to us and why we have to get the state involved.
Okay. Well, 30 years ago, when Cumberland County made the decision that they were going to build the Crown Coliseum, we were very fortunate enough to be able to get through the legislature a food and beverage tax, which is 1% on all prepared foods. Not 1% if you go to the grocery store, it's 1%. 1% if you go to a dine-in restaurant. It's 1% if you go to Publix and buy or any other grocery store that has a deli and buy prepared food. There's 1% that goes on there. And the purpose of that was to not only help construct the Crown Coliseum, what we know now is where they play hockey and that they do all the big things, but also to help with the maintenance of it. There is not any, very few public venues like that, entertainment venues that make money. So most everywhere, no matter if you go to Greensboro or anywhere else, that they don't on its own turn a profit, but what they bring to the community in tax dollars of people coming in hotels, people other going to restaurants and doing the other things. And not only that, the quality of life, the measurement there does make it an important part of our community to have something like this. You had mentioned that we're like one of the only ones. We're actually in the entire state, we're one of only 4 that have had it. And so we're very fortunate in that. And what our goal is that the food and beverage tax, what we want to do is get it extended for a time, because the county is very interested in building a performing arts center. And we are the only county in the state of over 300,000 people who don't have a venue like that. Now, obviously, we're in the middle of a feasibility study to find out everything in the Crown Coliseum and what the future of it looks like, and locations and size and all that stuff. But then, of course, the COVID hit, and everybody was just doing what they could to kind of hunker down and get through this to figure it out. So we kind of felt like public input at don't know and doing that. But by and large, there are some really good numbers showing out that people are ready for that. Jim Graff.
Boy, are people ready for it, especially after 2020.
I know. I buy an airplane ticket now, because once it goes, everybody's going to go somewhere. But I was talking to Jim Graff out at the Crown, who manages the Crown portion. And he has said to us that they have been in constant contact with people who had bought tickets on shows that were canceled because of the pandemic. And they're in constant contact, refunding when they want. But over 80% of the people said, I want my ticket for when they come back and they have the show. So that's a very good sign. But I guess the point I want to bring up is it would be a shame for Cumberland County to lose this food and beverage, because it's very difficult to get one. And we're just very fortunate. And Wendy, we all know tourism matters in a community. It can be as big an industry as 5 or 6 factories or any other thing, because what you're doing with a tourism industry, it's why places like Moore County, where Pinehurst is, and Buncombe County, where Asheville is, and all your beach properties, they're able to bring in dollars from outside your county. And then that way you can use those dollars and continue to provide services while not putting a big burden on the property tax owner. So tourism does matter. We saw it when the U.S. Open went to Pinehurst, that it spilled over into Cumberland County. We used to see it when they did the All-American Marathon. All the hotels were booked up. I hope that the city continues on with their plan for the Travel League baseball recreational complex, because travel sports are huge now. And when people come into your community, they eat at your restaurants, they stay in your hotels, they go out and they go to your movies, and they bring those dollars into our community, helping us to continue to do that. So tourism does matter. The food and beverage tax is not a general tax to where we could just spend it on anything. It has to go to entertainment type venues that bring people to our community. And that is the goal of the food and beverage tax. I'm trying to keep it going. There is some debate now on what that looks like. We've brought it up to the legislation. The city and the county have gotten together and kind of worked out some kinks to where we think we can both support it. But I think there's a little bit of uncomfort at the legislative level about how we move forward. But I would tell you, it would be an absolute shame to the entire community if we weren't able to reinvest in our community in things like entertainment. I don't think anybody will say that the Woodpeckers was a bad thing. It's a beautiful stadium. They had great numbers, and hopefully, if a performing arts center has decided that it goes to downtown or wherever it does go, that we can also bring in people to do those same things. And not only for outside people in our community deserve these things also, because when at the end of the day, we shouldn't have to go to another town to enjoy the things that they have when we have the capability of doing it right here. Correct.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things that, oh my gosh, I could just talk to you for hours, and we're running out of time. In fact, we're over already, but we started a little bit late, so I'm just taking privilege here and doing it. I just want to say from my perspective and my involvement that in the past years, the city and the county have really knocked heads over a lot of things, but it seems in the past year or two that the relationship between the city and the county has really improved. And I know you and Kathy specifically work hard on that because you're brother and sister. But I think everyone's really come together to kind of make that relationship better. Are you seeing that from your end, or am I just not seeing the reality?
Well, I'm one of the few people that have seen it from both ends. And, one of the things that as a county commissioner, Fayetteville is in Cumberland County, as is Hope Mills, as is Spring Lake, and all the other towns that are, they're part of our group. So for too many times, people in general have looked at the city and county differently. But keep in mind that city residents vote for county commissioners. So we have a responsibility to them also on things that happen. We have a responsibility to provide schooling. We have human services, social services, and public health, the libraries, the detention center, and many of the other things that we do. So I've never really thought of us as being, adversarial. Now, there are certain times that something might be better for the city, but not as good for the county. But ultimately, if the city does a program that causes the county to raise their tax, everybody in the city is going to get a tax increase because they're all members of the county. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll give you a little analogy about how I think we don't look at it pragmatically as a group. Is if you remember the Civil War Learning Center, everybody was on this big thing about, well, the city's going to give $7.5 million and the county's going to give $7.5 million. Well, guess what? I live in the city of Fayetteville. That means they've committed me to $15 million because you live in both. And so it's not that we're not two separate entities. We should be running together to build the community so that it's a great place to live, work, play, raise your family. And all that.
And it was a great comment, because the one thing that I think that we don't really grasp all the time is when we read these articles about the city's paying this and the county's paying this, is that both of those entities are 100% funded by the taxpayer. So the reality is you need to figure out, where you sit and what you're paying as a taxpayer, and then get involved in the conversation. So that was a wonderful, wonderful way to sort of tie that up. But we don't get to make fun of you and your brother-sister relationship because Kathy had to leave the call again. So we're going to have to get both of you on and have a little bit of fun with that, because the purpose of these conversations is to be informative, but also have a little bit of fun. So we'll have that back. We'll get it back.
Well, Wendy, I appreciate the opportunity, and I always enjoy speaking with you. And I'm not sure how many of the other developers are and the members of the Home Builders Association are on the call, but ask me. I'll do my best. I may not give you the answer you want, but I'll promise you I'll give you the answer as best I can. And, you know, that's kind of what I'm here for. I feel like as an elected official, you have to do what's best for your community as a whole. And I think too many times developers have gotten this bad rap that, you know, all they care about is developing their land and then moving on out. Well, I can tell you right now, most of the developers that I know have made a personal, financial, and personal stake into our community. And, you know, they're not going anywhere. It's not like some guy came from New York, builds a thing and goes back to New York. Most of the developers I know are invested in this community at a high level. And one thing we know about a small community is everybody knows somebody.
Yep.
Yep. And so what you have to do is we all want to live here. We all want this to be a great place. And I think developers are a big part of that. We just got to get together. And so many times I think that that we got to do a better job of marketing ourselves as home builders in these communities that may get misinformation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, that was a very good observation that you brought in earlier. And it's one of the things Habitat's particularly good at before they started development, is going in and getting the actual people who live in the community really engaged and involved. And maybe that would help. So I always like a good suggestion to come out of a conversation.
I'm full of those.
Solution oriented versus problem specific, right? All right. Well, Jimmy, thank you very much for your talk today. Really appreciate your time. I look forward to seeing you in person again one day soon. And thank you for keeping up all the good work and everything you do for our community.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. And please, anytime, I'd be happy to come back.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. And thank you everyone for attending.